Hey, sweet friends, welcome to a new member exclusive tutorial video. In today's tutorial, we are going to be decorating a barnyard cow. Now, of course, to decorate a cow cookie, it can be used for a myriad of other themes, such as a Chick-fil-A theme, a farm theme, just an animal theme, a rodeo theme. Really, you can use this for so many different uses. However, today I am going to be using it for a barnyard themed set, which was for a birthday specifically. I will link in the description box below the other tutorial videos I have done for this set. I'll link the playlist so that you can find that easily. And there are a whole lot more videos coming. So if you are interested in a specific animal, just keep watching. They will be coming soon. Now, without further ado, let's decorate this cute little cow. As we start to decorate our cow cookie, I do want to mention that this cookie cutter is in our Etsy shop. I will link it in the description box below, but if you are just searching on our Etsy shop, it is under the animals section of our cookie cutters. And don't forget, as a member, you get 20% off your order every single time you order. Just make sure you put the code MEMBERS in the shop coupon code at checkout. And if you ever have any problems at all, you can always message me and I can discount you afterwards. If you can't get it to go through for some reason and you really need to order the cookie cutters right away, I can credit you back what you would have gotten off using the member code. So if you forget, if you've ordered and you forget, or I don't catch it on my end, always message me. I can always give you a credit later, and Etsy will refund it to whatever card you use to check out. Okay, getting back to our royal icing, remember that when you are doing characters, animals, anything like that, you are going to have to think about your cookie and think about the layers of your cookie, and you are going to have multiple steps in order to ice your cookie or frost your cookie. So you're going to do sections that do not touch each other first. So I'm going to outline the inner part of his ear. I'm going to do the mouth part of our cow, and I'm going to let those sections dry, and then I'll move on to another section and I'll flood those, and then I'll move on to another section and I'll flood that. So it does take a little bit more time when you're doing characters, animals, things along those lines. But it is worth it because the end product, when you layer and you take your time and you let all the icing dry in between the steps, it adds dimension, it adds realism to our 2D cookies. It makes them look more like the real thing. So to start, I did put some gray on the inside of our cow ear. You can use whatever color you want. I opted for a light gray on the inside of his ear. And I did a light pink for its snout. Is it a cow snout? Its nose? I don't think it's a snout. I think it's a nose, or the mouth section of our cow. I did choose to use a light pink for that. And I'm going to outline those sections. I'm going to flood them. I'm going to pop air bubbles. And then after that has dried, now because these are smaller sections, it's not going to take near as long to dry. So do keep that in mind. You don't have to wait hours on end between steps. Just decorate these cookies, decorate a few more different designs, then come back and start the process over. So normally when I have like a lot of animals such as this, I'll do a little bit on each different design, and then I'll start back over and I'll do another assembly line and I'll do more steps and then I'll start back over. And that way you're not wasting any time by the time that you get done with whatever design you end up on and you start back over. Your cookie has had plenty of time to dry and it's ready for the next step. Now for the cow's face, I wanted to do white with black spots, the traditional look of a cow. And you can do this one of two ways. You can either do a wet on wet technique, or you can do where you do full white, and then later after that's dried, then you can come back with edible marker and draw your spots on. Now, to be really honest, I did it both ways to see which I liked more. And I don't always do this, but I never have issue with color bleed. Well, really very rarely do I ever have issue with color bleed. I can count on one hand the amount of times in 5 years that I've been decorating cookies that I have had issues with color bleed. But sometimes when you're doing a white and a black, you can get some color bleed. And that is because your black is so saturated and your white is very unsaturated, especially because I know sometimes people will use white food coloring in their white, just their white icing. I personally do not do that, but I do know that some people swear by it. They think that that helps prevent color bleed. But as somebody who never has issues with color bleed, I I definitely don't add that extra step. It's extra cost. It's an extra step. So I do not add white to my white icing, but I do know a lot of people that swear by it. So either way is fine. I just prefer, if I don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it. I'm lazy. And also I'm going to save the money. But I have found that when I have done like Dalmatian dogs in the past, when I've done cows in the past, there are times where that black will bleed a little bit into the white icing. And I don't normally have issues with wet on wet technique. I don't normally have issues with that kind of color bleed happening, but I just really think it's because black is such a saturated color that it tends to happen a little bit more often when you do a wet on wet technique with white icing and you have black as well. So I did do it both ways here. I actually did the wet on wet technique first, and you can see me do that. I did white icing, and then I just went right away with my black icing, and I made a few dots, a few spots on the side of his face. And then I decided I'm going to do some with edible marker too to see which I prefer in case I do have some color bleed. And in that case, I went ahead and flooded the entire face white other than where the hair is. And then I'm going to wait until that's really, 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 really dry. And then I will come back and I'll do black spots on that. And you'll see me do that later. No matter which way you do it, you will do the face first. So you'll either do the wet on wet with the black spots, or you'll do full white and you'll come back later and do the marker work on top after that icing has really, 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 really dried. And I will show you that in just a little bit. But either way, you'll do that section. And then the last thing you'll do to get the cookie completely covered in royal icing from top to bottom is you will do the hair, which I opted to give our cow some black hair. Now, I do want to take one more second and mention that whenever you're popping air bubbles and you're doing a wet on wet technique, you have to be extra careful because when you're moving your icing around, you're also going to be changing the look of that wet on wet. In this case, it's spots, sometimes it's stripes, sometimes it's other designs. So if you're popping air bubbles and you have a wet on wet technique, be very, very, very gentle to not move your icing around too much, or you may end up messing up your original design. Okay, now moving back on to the hair, you're going to outline that last section, which is just at the top, and you will once again use your scribe tool, get out any air bubbles. And I also use that scribe tool to push my icing all the way to the line between the cow's face and the hair, just to make sure that I get in all of those little crevices and those little areas that might be a little difficult to get with just your icing bag. All right, so now that my entire cookie has had plenty of time to dry, and I know that it's safe to come back and draw on my icing and not have to worry about the icing being too wet and my marker puncturing through my icing, you're now going to see me draw on the spots for our cow. Again, if you just wanted to do the wet on wet technique, you sure could have, and this step is totally unnecessary because you would have already had the spots on your cow. But for me, I decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and draw and just see which design I like better. So I am drawing on the spots here. And again, I'm just kind of putting some spots around the side of his face. And then I'll come back and I'll add the eyes and some nose holes, and I'll add just a little bit more detail there. But with your edible marker, one of the things that I prefer when I am doing a large area of color like this is I kind of prefer to draw with lines, because when you are doing marker work and it's this big of a space, you can actually see like the flow of your coloring. And so if you're scribbling and you're just filling it in, you can kind of tell where you have marked. And I personally don't prefer I prefer as neat of work as I can possibly do. So that means that for me, when I am doing marker work in a large area, instead of just scribbling like you would on a piece of paper, I'm actually going to drag my marker from top to bottom in that section. I'm going to fill in the entire section that way. And then you have lines of color, and yes, you can still see the lines where they kind of overlap, but to me that looks better than like scribbling and having the overlap there. So just a little tip, it may not make a difference to you whatsoever, but that is how I prefer to do marker work in a section like that. While I had my marker out, I did go ahead and do our sweet little cow's smile, because that was also going to be done with a marker. And after that, it's time to do the eyes of our cow and the cow's little nose and nostrils. So I have kind of a small hole cut into my black icing. So if you are using a piping tip, definitely use the smallest hole that you have. I really love the PME tips for this really precise work. But whatever icing tip you have, just make sure you try to find the smallest that you can find and make sure you're using a medium thick icing here. You definitely need it to smooth out a little bit because it is going to be the eyeball, but you also need it to be thick enough you don't have to worry about it cracking. So I err on the side of more thick, not too thick, not like it breaks your hand to pipe it thick, but definitely thicker where you have to use your scribe tool and kind of shake that icing with your scribe tool quite a bit to get it to smooth out. And then, because if it's that thick, then you don't have to worry about it cratering as much. And I am using a projector on all of these cookies just for precision, just to be able to crank out the same look for every single cookie. But if you look at the image that is with this cookie cutter, I do think you can freehand it. Just make sure that you try to get that eye spacing the same in all of your cookies and look at that image and really try to copy it as best as you can. But if you do not have a projector, I highly recommend that is one of the very first purchases that you make to invest in yourself and in your business. It will change your life. Your cookie life. I absolutely guarantee it. But I don't want to just leave our little cow with black eyes. And so I want to add a cartoony look to all of these animals. So I'm going to give 2 dots of white in our little cow's eye. I'm going to do a larger white dot kind of at the top of the black, and then I'll do just a tiny smaller white dot at the bottom of the eye. It kind of mimics that like anime look, that kind of cartoon-ish look that really makes our cow look friendly and cute. Now, you don't want to pipe too much white into the eye, or that also could cause your black to crack and crater, because if that icing has too much weight on it, it will buckle under the weight. So you definitely want to put just the tiniest bit of icing. If you don't feel like you can do it with your piping bag, I always recommend either piping a little white dot onto your scribe or onto a toothpick and then placing that icing onto that small area like the eyeball from your scribe tool or from your toothpick and not actually from the icing bag. I do that a lot. I actually really like that technique. So if you feel like you can't just pipe directly white icing from your bag, definitely don't feel like you have to. You have other options. So just pipe a little bit of white icing onto a scribe tool, onto a toothpick, and then directly put that icing onto the eyeball. Just do it quickly before that icing dries. You want the black icing to still be wet so that it incorporates that white icing and that they all dry at the same time. I have in the past let the black eye completely dry and then added white on top. And you can do that, but it's just one more dot. It's like, because the eyeball doesn't blend all together, it kind of looks funny to me to do that, because then you have the white part of the eye sticking up higher than the black part. So I personally prefer to make sure I do the white part at the same time I'm doing the black part of the eye so that it all blends together as it dries. But you can, if you want to experiment and see what you think if you like it or not to have the white on after the black has dried, that's fine too. There is no right or wrong in this cookie world. It's all just about experimenting and figuring out what your personal preference is, your personal taste is in decorating. Now, I'm not done with our cow. I want to give our cow a little bit of horns. So we're going to do that with a brown. Now, remember, I have a whole lot of animals that I'm doing in this barnyard set, and I'm trying to recycle all of the colors as much as I can. I don't want to create too many colors for this set. So this brown is actually a color that I used on the apple tree that I make for this set. I also use it on other animals like the horse for this set. So definitely, if you have colors that you can use without having to make new icing specifically for a small area like this, feel free to do that. Or you could skip the cow horns altogether. I don't feel like it's necessary for the cow to have horns in this design. It's just with the graphic I purchased to make these cookie cutters. If you don't know, a lot of times I do purchase my graphics for these cookie cutters. Sometimes I make them from scratch. Sometimes I purchase an entire set. I get a lot of my designs on a website called designbundles.com, and they have commercial licenses there. And so I'm able to purchase a graphic on designbundles.com, and then I'm able to use it to make things such as cookie cutters. So, and legally have that license to do so. So that's why I love design bundles, and it's actually pretty cheap too. And I have the license for forever. So it's a great thing if you're looking for graphics to use and you always want to make sure you're in compliance. It's a great place to go. And in the graphic I purchased for this Barnyard set, it actually had the cow had horns. So I just wanted to keep that look and be true to the graphic I purchased, but you don't have to have it. I think the cow is cute without them. But I did use a darker brown icing here. I outlined the horns, and then I'm just going to go back and forth with my thick icing and fill in that space that I outlined. And then I'm going to use my scribe tool and smooth out that area. Now, earlier, I did the same kind of back and forth on the gray part of the cow ear, and I didn't smooth that out. And truthfully, I made this set quite a while ago, and I can't remember why I didn't smooth that out. Now, looking at it, I wish I would have smoothed out that gray area. So if you see that texture and you see the back and forth on the gray part of his ear and you're wondering why I didn't smooth that out, I honestly don't know. So you're more than welcome to smooth out that gray area of your cow's ear, or if you like the look of that kind of back and forth texture, then feel free to leave it like I did. But that's it. Our cow is done. And that is one animal of many in this Barnyard themed set. So like I said, I have a whole lot more cookies coming. Again, some of them will be on my regular YouTube channel. Some of them will be here as a member exclusive. So if you have a certain animal that you are looking forward to seeing sooner rather than later, just comment down below and I'll make sure I add that to the top of the priority list when making these videos. All right, sweet friends, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon for a